welcome back to this conference. And now for afternoon keynote speaker is Professor Guo Yuliang. We are honored to have Dr. Hong Zixin of Kaohsiung Medical Xiaogang Hospital and Professor Cai Pengzi of National Cheng Kung University serve as our moderator. Now let's welcome Professor Hong and Professor Cai. 此次大会下午的场次，第一个邀请的讲者为台大郭玉良教授。我们很荣幸邀请到高雄市立小港医院洪志新副院长和国立成功大学工业卫生科技环境医学研究所蔡鹏之特聘教授担任主持人。现在让我们欢迎主持人洪副院长和蔡鹏之特聘教授。
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Zixin Hong, Vice Superintendent, Kaohsiung Municipal Xiaogang Hospital. It's my great honor to moderate this session, keynote speech number 4, and to introduce Professor Guo Yuliang. Professor Guo Yuliang is a distinguished professor in Environmental Occupational Medicine, School of Medicine, National Taiwan University, NTU, and attending physician in NTU Hospital. He obtained his medical degree from NTU University and master degree from Harvard School of Public Health and PhD degree in Environmental Health Occupational Medicine from Johns Hopkins University. He served as a residency in internal medicine in Texas Tech University and also in occupational medicine in the University of California at San Francisco. He became a faculty member in medical school, National Cheng Kung University in 1990. In 2006, he became a faculty member in medical school of National Taiwan University until now. He was president of Asia Congress Occupational Health 2002. His research interest has been on the healthy effect caused by environmental agents such as air pollutant, allergen, climate change, and endocrine disrupting chemicals. His research work resulted in more than 320 international papers and 10 book chapters. Today, the topic he would like to talk is air pollutant and diabetes mellitus. Professor Guo, please.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
And do you see my first slide?
Yes.
I'd like to thank my co-author, Dr. Siqun Pan, who is currently working in NIEHS as well. Do you see that turning to the second page?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. There are many health effects of air pollutants, and that would include mortality and respiratory, cardiovascular, and psychiatric diseases. And also chronic conditions like cancer, diabetes mellitus, and congenital conditions. And from the epidemiological point of view, the more immediate effects are studied more. So the mortality per day and the respiratory effect, cardiovascular, in terms of the attack, is more studied. But a more chronic conditions occurrence takes a longer cumulative exposure, is less investigated, but currently is increasingly understood, despite more still much information to be studied. Diabetes mellitus is an important clinical and chronic condition. As you can tell, the global situation in diabetes is actually, if you look at the, let's see if I can, Okay, this is a laser point. So it has become the most important 10 leading cause of death. And there are increment of deaths according to that due to diabetes mellitus in many countries, but the number one being India, China, Indonesia, Mexico, and United States. Recently, a meta-analysis reviewed air pollution and type 2 diabetes incidence. And you will find that PM 2.5 is related to occurrence of T2DN, and that is for per 10 microgram cubic meter increment, about 10% increase. Such effect was not observed in NO2. However, there are knowledge gap, which is the dose-response relationship. You would see this is a typical toxicological dose-response curve, and you would see that it's a sigmoid shape from the initial increment followed by a more straight line, and then most of people have been affected, therefore a slow increase. So what happened is we are always wondering about the no observable effect level. Whether that exists for air pollution is a question. So why do I say knowledge gap still exists, even you know that there is increment in per 10 microgram per cubic meter? Because in the meta-analysis, usually we do not know where in the curve that belong. So the meta-analysis can accumulate information from different dose level and come up with a summary score, but that doesn't know which portion of the curve is important. And if we look at the literature carefully, we'll see that many investigations in the lower dose range from the United States and Canada, some from the EU, some from Asia, but a lot of information related to exposure to PM at PM 2.5 at 20 to 35 have been lacking. That's why I say the dose response relationship is not totally established. And then the NOEL is still unknown. For chronic disease, you would also like to know whether there are a clear dose response like this. So this is a long-term follow-up study in Canada involving more than 2 million people. And hospitalization due to cardiovascular events and stroke are related to PM 2.5 here, ozone here. And stroke is related to PM 2.5 and ozone here. What you want to notice is that there seems to be a straight line increment associated with PM 2.5 and ozone for acute myocardial infarction hospitalization. But that's not true for stroke. There seems to be a threshold. So ozone, ozone is, for example, up to 40 something, you will see more observable effect in stroke. However, in this investigation, you can't totally separate the effect of PM 2.5 and ozone. So cumulate them together. PM 2.5 and ozone contribute to 6% of AMI, 6.8% of stroke. And this is at the 10-year moving average, PM 2.5 of 6.7, ozone of 37.5. So in the PM level, it's rather low, intermediate for the ozone. And however, such effect gives us very good description of dose response, which we do not have yet for diabetes. We participated in a gestational diabetes mellitus study to relate it to ambient air. And this is based on the Taiwan birth cohort study. And we found that there is almost 20,000 women who were pregnant during year 2004 and 5. About 1.9% was diagnosed as having gestational DM, and they are older with higher BMI. It's not surprising. And we found also 1 ppb increment of NOx is related to 2% increment of gestational DM. And if you look carefully among the NOx, the NO itself became most important. It's 1.5 per 1 ppb increment. And this occurs, most important exposure period is the first and second trimesters. So we thought that exposure to higher NO level or NOx level during pregnancy is related to gestational DM. This later got included in a meta-analysis, which show that PM 2.5 is borderline, but probably not significant, related to GDM. NOx is related. NO2 is related. So it is interesting to know that, to found that why are the related pollutants different from those of DM? So the related pollutants for DM is PM 2.5, and for GDM is NO2, is NOx. So we have some knowledge gap there. This is summarized of the mechanism from the several papers, but the knowledge gap is that what are the most important steps that lead to the DM occurrence? Is that oxidative stress, or is that something happening in the liver or adipose tissue? Is quite uncertain. So we know that air pollutants are related to DM and GDM. Then we have to look, because we not only prevent DM, we like to prevent the complications of DM, which are actually very important medical conditions. So there are microvascular complications like retinopathy, nephropathy, neuropathy, macrovascularly, cerebral vascular disease like stroke, coronary heart disease like myocardial infarction, and peripheral vascular diseases. These are something that we should try to prevent. We look at the effect of renal function, renal effect from air pollution among diabetic patients. This is in collaboration with Dr. Xu Zhicheng from NHRI, and it's a longitudinal study involving 36 clinics and 812 type 2 DM follow-up for more than 3 years. And summarize the finding, the gender, waist girth, HbA1c are related to albumin increment. So more protein in the urine. But we also found that CO from the ambient air and PM2.5 exposure were also related with the IQR and related to 0.2 milligram per albumin per gram of creatinine, and PM2.5 IQR of 9 related to 0.8 milligram albumin per gram of albumin of creatinine. So this is some indication that proteinuria is increased with air pollutants in diabetes. And this is usually what happened to nephropathy. So initially there is a hyperfiltration, the glomerular filtration is increased. Then there was no change in glomerular filtration rate, and then it dropped until end-stage renal disease. And this is a period called incipient diabetic nephropathy. However, you would detect increasing albumin in the urine at this period. I think we found the relationship here. And does it indicate that nephropathy at the end will be increased? I think it's very likely. This is a meta-analysis studying the chronic liver disease, not specifically in diabetic patients, in everybody, but they found PM2.5, PM10, and NO2 to be all related to increment of the chronic liver disease, chronic kidney disease. And this is also associated with reduced glomerular filtration rate in here. So the findings seem to be comparable. And this would alarm us if this is found in diabetic patients with the finding of albuminuria and also the general population with increased CKD. It's most likely that diabetic may be susceptible to air pollutant effects on kidney. This is a study. We investigated the complication retinopathy. What we did was we used a national health insurance data set and look at diabetic patients, whether they develop diabetic retinopathy or not develop retinopathy. So it's a study on the complication diabetic retinopathy and look at their exposure to air pollutants. What we found was from the PM2.5 and PM2.5 to 10, both significantly related to occurrence of retinopathy. And for per 10 microgram per cubic meter, it is 1.29. So it's a large increment, like a 30% increment for associated with the PM 2.5. So I think this is something that indicate complication like retinopathy is related to air pollutants. I'd like to thank the first author, Dr. Pan. And the progression from GDM to DM is well documented, so that the woman with GDM, it's easy to become type 2 DM in the later life. We study in whether the progression from GDM to DM can be affected by air pollutants. And to make a long story short, PM 2.5 will give you increment of type 2 DM by about 20%. For those who had low exposure to PM and with diabetic GDM, the diabetes increased by about 13 times. If you are having GDM and also high exposure to PM 2.5, the increment is almost 30 times, indicating that the PM 2.5 and GDM act synergistically for later diabetes occurrence. So if we know that diabetes and their complications are related to air pollutants, how should we protect the people? Of course, the single most important is to reduce the exposure through tightened air quality standards and environmental control. However, we know that the threshold is almost non-existent for many chronic diseases, and we are not sure whether it exists for DM. So there are other activities that we should be able to do. Health promotion activities, among those with risk factor of diabetes and among those with GDM, that could probably prevent the occurrence of DM. Active treatment of DM to prevent complications. Whether we should use PPE or indoor protection to protect people when there is high level. And are there effect modifying environments such as greenness in the residential surroundings? These are new topics to be addressed. So there are actually some effect modifier to weaken the effect of PM 2.5 on diabetes, like fruit consumption, like smoking, smoke cessation, and clean heating energies. That's already documented. So these probably can be done. For those who already have GDM, if you do nothing, they progress to DM in a rather fast speed. However, if you do lifestyle modification or provide metformin, then it slows down the progress from GDM to diabetes. So this may be considered, especially in the higher polluted area. Kidney disease can be prevented by a very good ratio, almost a half in the reduction if glucose level is controlled well. And this paper summarizes personal and household protection. For personal respiratory protection, subclinical CV health benefits from well-fitted respirators are documented. However, just face masks or behavior change is a question mark. For household, this I think I will appreciate Dr. Tsai's input later. The HEPA filter air purifier can reduce indoor PM 2.5 and improve subclinical health markers. However, the author also say only when emission cannot be controlled at the source. For example, forest fire, the individual and household level intervention may be an option. And in most cases, such intervention should be supplemental to emission reduction efforts that benefit entire community. I agree with this. The other thing is, if you want to do the personal protection or indoor protection, when do you want to do it? For example, this is a level with fluctuation of PM 2.5 in 2018. When should we install the PPE or turn on the indoor protection? It's still unknown. And that is due to the lacking of a clear dose-response relationship. This shows the lung cancer relationship by global burden of disease investigators and also the Canadian CV disease. We do not have it for DM so far. Effect modifying environment like greenness is mentioned. However, it's not certain whether it has additional effect except for modifying the air pollution, reducing the air pollution. If there is additional effect, that would be a very important thing to increase your greenness in the surrounding. So I think I conclude very briefly. Who are highly susceptible people? Pretty much known. Are there effective measurements? Some and increasing. At what level? We do not know. But recent WHO guideline say PM 2.5 or 5 microgram per cubic meter, NO2 of 5.3 ppb, ozone of 30 ppb. So there are many issues to be considered and studied. I'd like to end here and thank you for your attention. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for Professor Guo's excellent talk. I didn't see any question on the board, so may I have ask Professor Guo first question?
Yes, please.
Since you measure the relationship between the type 1, type 2 DM and gestational DM, because I'm a pediatrician, do you look at the type, how about the type 1 DM is also close relationship with air pollutant?
I think it's a good question. I haven't looked carefully into the type 1 DM, so I have to say, please give me some time, and I have to respond to you, and if possible to all audience, whether type 1 DM is related to it. But the type 2 DM is more certain. So sorry, I need to respond to you later.
Sorry, the question is not so good. So,
No. Good. Yeah, it's a good question.
Until now, no any other question on the audience. So I may ask the second question. My second question is any relationship between the air pollutant and the DEM resistance for the drug or insulin?
It's a wonderful question, actually. I don't think there is much information at this moment related to the treatment effect. I think we should use the treatment. I think it has to do with difficulty in carrying out the study. So a lot of study on air pollution has been related to the secondary data, because primary data on air pollution exposure is hard to obtain. And therefore, the secondary data, again, has some difficulty in obtaining their the drug medication history and how compliant they are with medicine. So I'm not sure if there is any data existing for the resistance to medication in the highly exposed population. However, in here, I think from the mechanistic point of view, if the air pollution can affect beta cell and the muscle, liver, adipose tissue, and inflammation, systematic inflammation, I think it's very likely it would affect the medicine that you give it. And my understanding is the metformin not only provide effect in lowering the blood glucose, it also provide some effect in antioxidation, which might be related to the documented GDM to DM effect. So not sure if there is any data, but I believe this study is very important to be done for the near future.
Okay, because we have another moderator, Professor Tsai. So
yes, I
question
do have
from
one
Professor
question.
Tsai?
Yes, I do have one question for Professor Guo.
Mm-hmm.
I found that the cost fraction of PM, like PM 2.5 to PM 10, and they also have effect on diabetes. So would they have same potential mechanism?
Mm-hmm.
DM?
Well, I think this is a good question as well. From what Dr. Chen presented this morning, I also learned a lot from the presentation. There seems to be different components or constituents in the PM 2.5 and 2.5 to 10. And apparently, due to the different constituents in the groups of air pollutants, their effect may be different. Probably because the content of metal, the content of biological burning are quite different. So I would think that the effects are different, but I do not have a very strong evidence so far. I think it's worth investigation for the near future. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you.
we still have several minutes. Still no question from audience. So, Professor Guo, may I have a third question?
Sure.
So my question is the air pollutant labels correlated to the blood sugar label? Once the air pollutant is very high, the blood sugar for DM patient will be higher, and clinical doctors should have the much drug to treat the blood sugar.
I think this is also very good. If you like the initial alarming system for the air pollution comes from those with asthma. So those people with asthma, they are more susceptible to attack of asthma to when air pollution levels are high. So they gave up alarms saying that this is unhealthy for susceptible population like asthmatic. And I think my presentation today is to hopefully to let people consider whether we should also provide alarming system for diabetic patients. It's not sure whether it will have an immediate attack like asthma occurs. Not sure. However, in a cumulative way, if you are exposed to higher level of pollutants, the potential of having worse control blood sugar is there. So I think it's a good point. We should consider that, but the alarm need to be communicated. The alarming system has to be communicated between the health authority and the environmental authority to make the decision.
Okay, thank you for your good answer. Because the time is up, we should move to another session, moderated by Professor Cai Pengzhi. Professor Cai, please.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to next presenter. Keynote speaker, is that right? Okay, I find Professor Wu is there. Yeah. So may I introduce Professor Wu? My name is Pengzhi Cai from National Chenkang University, and it's truly my privilege to introduce you our distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Shida Wu. Shida Wu got his doctoral degrees from National Taiwan University, major in forestry. He now is an associate professor in the Department of Geomatics, National Chenkang University, Hainan, Taiwan, and also a associate research fellow in NHRI, and also a director of Chinese Society of Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing. And Professor Wu have very wide research interest. Most importantly, in the air pollution modeling, air pollution health risk assessment, and health benefit of surrounding greenness. And Professor Wu has published more than 60 SCI papers. Today, his topic is for the presentation is using land use machine learning models to estimate daily NO2 concentration variations in Taiwan. Let's welcome Professor Wu.
First, thanks for the introduction from Professor Cai. And Professor Cai, Professor Hong, our chairperson, and ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for coming to my talk. I am Wu Zhida. I also have an English name, John, so you can also call me John Wu. And just like the introduction from Professor Cai, I am now teaching in the Department of Geomatics, National Chenkang Universities. And I also have a long-term collaboration with the NHRI. So I also serve as an adjunct associate research fellow in NHRI.
Actually, I mean, students in our department, they learn diverse technologies. Let's say, for example, our students learn GIS, the Geographic Information Systems. They also learn how to prepare the satellite images and also apply satellite images on different topics like the environmental monitoring. We also learn big data analysis. We use machine learning to fit a model to monitor the environmental changes, and we also learn some spatial statistics skills. So for me, personally, I mainly apply this kind of geospatial technologies on two topics related to public health and environmental health. The first one, my first research interest mainly focused on air pollution modeling. And the second one is I want to understand how much people exposed to the surrounding greenness. Then I apply this kind of information like the air pollution exposures and the surrounding greenness exposures to see what are the linkages between the environmental exposures with human health, the effects on human health. So this is my research expertise and research interest. So first, I would like to thank for the long-term support from the NHRI. So I have been joining the research projects conducted by led by the NHRI for more than 8 years. So we mainly focus on the air pollution and air pollution health effects. So my role in this team is, let's say I should say that I'm a modeler. So I just use the technologies I introduced to you like GIS and remote sensing. We try to apply this kind of technologies to estimate the spatial and also the temporal variabilities of air pollution in Taiwan. Then our collaborators and our partners in this team, they just use my data to assess the potential health impacts from air pollution on human health. So in the past 8 years, we also have proposed several approaches to make the air pollution prediction better and try to predict the air pollution variability more accurate. So basically we propose 3 approaches. The first one is a localized AUR model, and the second one is a hybrid region AUR model, and the third one we try to apply the machine learning to develop a machine learning-based ensemble model for air pollution predictions. We also have published several papers related to this kind of methodologies. So the first approach is we try to incorporate some culture-specific emission sources factors in the land use regression modeling. I mean, if you check a reference related to land use regressions in the Western cities, you will see the main factors they consider in their model, just like the traffic, industry, of course, the household, the residential areas, and also maybe sometimes they also consider about the effects from the thermal power plants. But if you go back to Taiwan or just you go back to the other cities in Asia, you must know that we have diverse culture-specific emission sources distributed at the community scale. For example, we have emissions from the incense burning. We also have emission from paper money burning in the temples. And if you go to a night market in Taiwan or the other Asian country, you will see people use a big fire for cooking, and the emission from cooking is very big impact on air qualities. So in our model, the localized land use regression model, we try to incorporate this kind of culture-specific emission sources like Chinese restaurants and the temples in our model to well depict the spatial variability of air pollution in Taiwan. So we also have applied this kind of methodology in several types of air pollution like PM2.5, ozone, PM2.5 constitutes. And my students from Indonesia, they also apply the same strategies to assess the PM10, PM2.5, and also nitrogen dioxide to assess their spatial variabilities in Indonesia. And in the second approach we propose, we call this one as a hybrid model. So in this model, we try to incorporate land use regression with spatial interpretation like kriging. We try to combine these two methodologies together. Basically, the idea is to incorporate the kriging interpreted air pollution levels as the predictors in the land use regression models, then try to improve the model performance by this kind of combinations. So 2 papers have been published by using the hybrid models. We focus on the PM2.5 and also nitrogen dioxide for the whole island. for the main island of Taiwan. And then now let's move to the latest approach we use. So this time we try to combine all of the strengths in approach 1 and approach 2. But this time we don't use linear regression to fit the model because in the conventional linear regression model, people usually use multilinear regressions to develop models, but there are some limitations by using the linear regression model to assess the relationship between air pollution levels and the predictive variables, because it's not easy to depict the nonlinear relationship by using linear models. So this time we don't use a linear model, but instead of that, we use several machine learning algorithms to try to improve the model performance. So this kind of machine learning based model have been applied in several cases like the PM2.5 and also nitrogen dioxide. This is also the case I want to talk in details to you later. And we also try to assess the spatial variability of carbon monoxide in Taiwan, and also we also try to focus on the VOC variabilities in the Kaohsiung industry areas. So now we have air pollution prediction from our model. So I just try to work together with several very outstanding researchers from different countries and from different research institutes. We work together and we will try to see how does the air pollution exposure affect human health. So here we consider not only the physical health, we also have some study talk about the mental health. And of course, we also try to deliver the scientific findings we learn from these studies to our, just like the governmental agencies. We hope this kind of information will be helpful for the EPA, Taiwan EPA, to improve the air quality in Taiwan, and also to improve the human well-being in Taiwan. Okay. So let's move to my major topic today. So here today, I want to introduce I want to share one of our recently published papers. In this one, we just try to use let's say the best approach we have developed. We use a machine learning based approaches. This time we want to see how does the machine learning model could depict the NO2 variabilities in Taiwan, and whether we can use this kind of approaches to to accurately estimate the NO2 variability for the whole island of Taiwan, and also for long periods for around 2 decades. And this paper has been published on the Journal of Cleaner Production in this year. And I would like to show my appreciations to all of our cooperators, like Professor Huizhen Su and Professor Huang Zhenwei from NCKU, Professor Li Xiaoyun from the National Taipei University of Nursing and Health Science, and also we also have a cooperator from the Professor Zhang Zhian from the National Jiao Tong University, and also Professor John Spanger from Harvard School of Public Health. And the first author, Pei-Yi Wang, and Wang Pei-Yi and Xiao Yaping, they are my students. We work together so we can have this kind of findings. So, okay, so now we know, everybody must know that, air pollution is becoming a growing concern issues in recent years. So we have different types of air pollution in the air. Let's say we have particle pollutants, but we also have gaseous pollutants. Among the gaseous pollutants, I think the nitrogen dioxide, NO2, is a very important gaseous pollutant, and particularly in the city areas, because we know the major emission sources of nitrogen dioxide is from fossil fuel combustions. So, for example, in Taipei City, this is also the capital city of Taiwan. We have a very busy traffic, and we have a very high populated area in Taiwan. So this kind of situation we might also face a big challenges from the nitrogen dioxide's impact on human health. So this picture just show you the spatial distributions of air quality monitoring stations in Taiwan, launched by Taiwan EPA. So basically, we have around 76 monitoring stations for the main island of Taiwan. But you can see we have very limited number of monitoring stations in the eastern part of Taiwan. We only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 monitoring stations in the eastern part of Taiwan. So we don't really know the real exposed level for people they are not close to the mining station, right? So even though we have more mining station in the western part of Taiwan, because most of the major cities located in the western city of Taiwan, but you can see the number is not good, or the distribution is also kind of a sparse distributions. So in this case, if you directly apply the measurements from these mining stations and to link the air pollution air pollution measurement from this mining station to the human health, you might find some challenges. I mean, for example, you might face a challenge about exposure miscalculations because we don't really have a mining station for everywhere. And also, when you conduct the health risk analysis, sometimes we might also have problems in overestimate or underestimate the health risk from the air pollution exposures. So in this case, sounds like we must need a more efficient way to estimate the air pollution variabilities for the whole island of Taiwan. So many spatial modeling approaches have been proposed in the past years, but let me say, one of the most popular approach, I think, might be the land use regressions. So this picture just try to illustrate the major idea of the land use regressions. So we have the measurements from the mining station, no doubt, and from GIS and remote sensing. This is my major expertise. We can know the spatial distribution and the spatial allocations of emission sources surrounding by the nearby the mining stations. So in this case, we use GIS and remote sensing to obtain the land cover emission sources distributions. We use this kind of information as predictive variables. Then we use the measurements from the mining station, from the fixed station as the dependent variables. So people in the past year, people simply apply the multiple linear regression to develop a prediction model. So in the case, the model, the prediction performance is good. So we can just apply this kind of land use land cover information to predict air pollution levels for non-major areas. So this is the basic idea of the land use regressions. Because we can very easily to obtain the data from GIS and remote sensing. So you can say this methodology, I mean, the land use regression is very easy to be used and very convenient, let's say, in general. So by here, I mean, I also want to highlight one more strength by using the land use regression, because the statistical analysis provides us a very useful way to identify the important predictive variables. For example, we can use the p-value, and we can use some statistical criterion to identify whether this predictive variables is useful or is statistical significant to the air pollutions. So, I mean, land use regression, the other strength from land use regression is to, let's say we can call this as a variable dimension reductions. We can try to figure out which variables are useful, which variable they might not make sense to be imported into the model. So, I mean, this is also one strength I want to highlight about the land use regression. But just like I mentioned to you in my very beginning part of the presentation, a linear model is not a good way to depict a nonlinear relationship. For example, for some predictive variables, they don't really show a linear trend with air pollutant variations, but they might show some nonlinear trend. But in this case, a linear model might not be a good tool to develop a model. So recently, I mean, the rapid development of machine learning provided us new solutions to fit a more complicated linear or nonlinear relationship between the land use land cover emission sources and the air pollution levels. So this kind, I mean, people start to apply different type of machine learning algorithm to develop the predictive models for air pollutions. But one of the biggest challenges, I mean, in the past year for applying the machine learning model to develop model is about predictive variables, because in the conventional machine learning approaches, they don't really have a way to identify, to figure out the important predictive variables. But in the case, if you have 600 predictive variables, machine learning algorithm just take all of them into the models, then use all of the 600 predictive variables to develop a model, then show you an outcome, the prediction from the models. But you don't really know the real association between each predictive variables with air pollutions, and you don't really have a way to reduce the the dimension of the predictive variables. So this is also that indicates we need to find a new way to overcome this kind of challenges. So in this case, in my study, I just try to combine the strengths from both the linear regressions and the machine learning. So first, we use the linear regression models to filter out important predictive variable. I just simply use the very widely applied variable selection approach. We use the stepwise variable selection procedures and UR. So during this step, we try to identify the important and also the variables with right directions with air pollution. Only this important and the important predictors will be kept in our database. Then in the second step, we use these selected variables from the statistical strategies. Then we apply this variable to and also couple with the machine learning algorithms to develop the prediction models. So now we have a benefits, we have a strength from the LUR in variable selections. Then we use the machine learning to develop a model, and we expect this kind of machine learning based model can have a better model prediction performance, because this one people usually say machine learning can depict better in linear and nonlinear relationship. And we also finally use the best model we developed to estimate the NO2 variability for the past 20 years. And the output from our model, we will earn a grid-based map. And for each grid size, for each 50 times 50 square meter areas, we will have one NO2 predictions level from our model. And this one is daily with a daily resolutions. Okay. So first, let me introduce the database we use in our model. So we collect the air pollution measurements from the Taiwan EPA. So we have around 76 mining stations. Our study years are around from 2000 to 2018. So we have data for the past 19 years. So we use a daily average resolution. We use a daily resolution database, the data from the Taiwan EPA. So totally, we have a big database for air pollution measurements. We have around 0.5 million observations from the Taiwan EPA. This one will be used as dependent variables for the model development. So we also collect the co-pollutants from the Taiwan EPA as the predictive variables. So we also have information like a PM10 and SO2 ozone. And we also include some weather factors like the temperature and the humidity and also wind speed as predictive variables in our model. As for the land use land cover predictive variables, we try to collect different types of land use land cover allocations from several GIS databases. For example, from the digital road network map, we can know the spatial distribution of local road, major road, and all types of roads. And we also have the land use land cover distribution from the land use inventory from our government. So from this database, we can know the information like the pure residential area, different types of residential area. We also know the distribution of the paddy, orchards, farmland, water body, and also different like airport and harbor. So we can have this kind of information from this land use inventory database. And as I mentioned to you, because I want to consider I want to incorporate the culture-specific sources in our model. So I also have a landmark database from private companies. And from this database, we can know the distribution of temples and trust restaurants in the whole island of Taiwan. And we also have the data about the spatial distribution of the industrial park. And we also consider the distribution of the coal-fired power plant in our model. And here, some studies, they also studied the roles of vegetation in air quality purifications. So we also use satellite-based measurements to identify the spatial distribution of the vegetation in Taiwan. So here we use NDVI, this kind of a spectrum-based vegetation index to represent the distribution of vegetation in Taiwan. And we also consider some topographic factors like elevation, aspect, and slope. So basically, we just try to extract all types of land use land cover information by using a GIS systems For example, here, this is the green points over here is the monitoring station, right? So first, we use the GIS to generate different types of buffers, circuit buffers. So here, the size of the circuit buffer used range from 50 meters to 5K meters surrounding by the monitoring stations. So we just try to calculate the density of the number of landmarks within these 14 buffer ranges. So we can earn a very big database for the spatial predictive variables. Total we have earned around 600 predictive variables from these geospatial land use land cover databases. So these 600 predictive variables will be used to develop the air pollution prediction models. Okay, so here's the framework for the whole study. So in the first step, we try to develop some database. We have an air quality database. We also have the GIS, the land use land cover database, right? So in the second step, we try to use the land use regression model to identify the important predictive variables. Then we just apply the selected predictive variables into 3 types of machine learning algorithm, including the neural network, random forest, and the XGBoost. And then we try to conduct some model validations to confirm the model reliabilities. Then we apply the best model we developed to predict the NO2 gradient maps for the main island Taiwan. So in the first step, at the land use regression stages, totally we applied 2 types of land use regression in this study. The first one is a conventional land use regression. So here we use the land use land cover as predictive variables to develop a multilinear regression model for NO2, no problem. But in the second one, I just use the method I introduced to you, the hybrid Kriging land use regression model. So this time, we also have a land use land cover information as predictive variable over here. But we just include 1 more predictive variables, and this one is obtained from the Kriging interpreted pollutants levels. So we include this new predictive variable to see whether combining these 2 approaches could improve the model performance. And land use regression, the computer land use regression will select the important predictors variables. Hybrid Kriging land use regression will also select the important predictive variables. So we also want to see whether this one or this one have a better performance in model development. And here we use a stepwise variable selection procedure in multiple linear regressions. We use a p-value smaller than 0.5 and smaller than 0.3 for variables enter and removals respectively. And we also consider the model collinearity issues. So we use a VIF smaller than 3 as a criterion. And as I mentioned to you, we also consider the direction between the dependent variables and the predicted variables. So only the variables with the right direction will be selected as the important variables. And let's move to the machine learning steps. So here I apply 3 types of machine learning algorithm: DNN, random forest, and XGBoost. Random forest and the XGBoost, both of them are decision-based algorithms. So basically, in this kind of algorithm, they just try to divide several and many small explainers, then integrate all of the prediction from this small explainers to obtain the final predictions for the model. And the DNN just like the very typical neural network approaches. So we also give a try for the deep neural network to see whether this one can predict NO2 variation good in Taiwan. Okay. So basically, 8 models were developed in our study. So the first one is we have a LUR variable selected from LUR. We also have variables selected from hybrid LUR. And we use this variable to develop the linear regression for itself. And we will also use this selected variable coupled with different types of machine learning algorithms. So totally we earned 8 added models developed in these studies. So we use several ways to confirm the model reliability. For example, in the first step, we try to randomly divide the data into 2 categories. The first one is testing data set with 80% of the data, 20% of the data as a validation data set. And we also try to conduct a tenfold cross validation to see to check the model reliability. And we also try to lift the data from 2017 and from 2018 as external data to confirm the model reliabilities, and also try to calculate the R-square by season and by 6 major cities to see whether our model have some overfitting issues in different seasons or different cities. And we use the R-square and adjusted R-square to represent the predictive ability of the model. We use MSE, MAE, and RMSE to identify the errors of the model. So this picture shows the trend, the temporal trend of the measurements of NO2 in the past 20 years. So basically you can see there's a decreasing trend in the past 20 years. And the average number of NO2 is around 17.7. So if you compare with the standard from the Taiwan EPA, the standard is 30 ppb. So basically we can see this one is good. I mean, Taiwan EPA really have a good work in controlling the NO2 emissions. But if you check with a new criterion from the WHO, we still have much efforts to do to make this one better. Also, here is also the best plots for the NO2 measurements from different types of mining stations. So no doubt we found that we have higher NO2 levels in traffic stations, and we found the lowest NO2 levels in the national park stations. Okay, so this table will show you the variables selected by the conventional LUR and also selected by the hybrid LUR. So you can see several types of the land-use variables were selected in these two models, like the industrial and commercial residential areas, the major road, and also the manufacturing, and also a major road density, temple, and also forest, and also distance to the water bodies. And of course, in the hybrid LUR, one more predictive variables, the collision interpreted NO2 levels was selected in the hybrid models. So this table will show you the model performance of land use regression based machine learning models. So here you can see there's a green square over here. So this is a model R square from the land use regression, the most conventional approaches. So I want to use this one, the 0.65 as a reference. Then I will compare this reference with the other or the proposed approaches. So here you can see LUR, the R square is 0.65. LUR coupled with DNN, coupled with land use regression, with random forest, and coupled with attributes. There's an increasing trend in the model performance from 0.65 to 0.84. You can see the model looks like much better. So here's the validation for the LUR for the LUR-based machine learning model. Here is the R square based on when we compare the predictions from the models and with the measurements from 2017 and from 2018. So the main model, the R square is 0.68 for LUR, and for the rest of the machine learning based model. And you can see the number between the main model and also for each year of the external data verification, they are very similar. So that indicates we don't have overfitting issues in these models. So let's move to the hybrid based models and coupled with the machine learning algorithms, the results from the model performance about the model development. So this time the hybrid model compared with the conventional LUR, the R square is 0.78, much better. And when you couple with the machine learning algorithm, it's much better compared with the previous slides. You can see in the best model, hybrid LUR coupled with attributes, the model performance is around 0.91. Very, very good, they say. So again, here is a table for the model validations. Here is the R square for the main model, R square for the data from 2017 and from 2018. Very similar, so no overfitting issues. So this table just show you the NO2 NO2 levels from the measurements and from the predictions by season. So overall, you can see the value between the measurement and the predictions, they are very close. So our model performs very well in prediction NO2. And this time, we just try to certify data by city for the top 6 cities in Taiwan. Again, the model predictions shows a very similar values with observations. And finally, this one just shows you the predictions and the observations for the past 20 years. they are almost overlapped together. And here's the mean values for predictions and the observations, very, very close. So that indicates our model perform very well and no overfitting issues. So finally, we have to use the best model, the hybrid prediction at UR, coupled with attributes to predict the NO2 variation in Taiwan. So this map shows the average values from 2000 to 2016. So we can see the spatial distribution of NO2. We have higher levels in the major cities and lower levels in the eastern part and also in the mountainous areas. And from 2000 to 2016, you can see the red areas indicates the higher potent areas, but you can see the potent shows a decreasing trend during the study period. And here I just want to show you the narrative of NO2. Again, from spring, summer, fall to winter, we can find there's a higher potent levels in the cooler season like the spring and winter, maybe due to the more atmospheric conditions and also the dispersion issues. So finally, is my conclusion. So we propose land use regression-based machine learning models for NO2 predictions for the main island of Taiwan. We found that this kind of machine learning-based model will predict the NO2 variations in Taiwan, and the overall model performance can achieve can explain around 90% of NO2 variation in Taiwan. So we will apply this kind of air pollution prediction to we'll work together with the other professor to see how NO2 will affect the health effect in Taiwan. And that's it. So I want to show my appreciation to NHI again. Thanks for NHI's long-term support on me. And that's it. Thank you very much for your listening.
Okay, thank you for Professor Wu's wonderful presentations. Any questions for Professor Wu? Okay. I have my first question for Professor Wu is you choose significant factors based on like land use regressions, and then apply this factor into machine learning. And I wonder if you didn't do this step, just put everything into your machine learning, which one will be better?
No doubt. If you don't do the variable selection procedures, I mean the full predictive variables model will perform better than my results.
So
you know.
So what's the importance of this measure to select variable?
Yeah, I think
because I find your best model, the major road was not included in your as a significant factor in your machine learning model. Say for NO2, I would like to say like automobile emissions. So traffic density is very important.
Yeah.
Say I don't see why you don't include this in this variable in your model. And so I think that's my second question.
Okay, so let me confirm with you, Professor Tsai again. So this is a table. This table shows the selected variables by both land use regression and also the hybrid land use regression models. So that indicates we use these selected variables and coupled with the machine learning to finalize the prediction model in our study. So you can see this is our best model. We use a hybrid. Our best model is a hybrid coupled with the machine learning, right?
Yes.
So here you can see in the hybrid model, we also this one, the major road density within the 50-meter buffer ranges was also selected as important predictive variables in the model. So we indeed have the road distributions in our model. Yeah. And the second, about your first questions, my idea, I mean, more and more people apply the machine learning algorithm in different study fields. But one of the core issues for the applications of machine learning algorithms is, is overfitting, let's say. You can, of course, for example, in my case, I have a spatial predictive variables with around 600 predictive variables in the database. I can just simply import all of these 600 predictive variables into the machine learning to develop the predictive model, no doubt. But the question will be, you use 600 predictive variables. So the first question will be, is it necessary to consider all of these 600 predictive variables? This is the first question. The second question will be, what is the coefficient estimate for each predictive variables in your model? Because as I know, we don't really know the correlations between every prediction variables with the air pollutions from the machine learning model. That in case, even though I import the major rod density within 15 buffer ranges as important predictive variables in the machine learning model, after the process of machine learning, they don't really show you this one is positive or negative correlated with your air pollutions. So that in case people want to know, based on our knowledge, only the important predictive variables should be used in the model. Only the variables which make sense should be used in the model. So in the case, I use all of the 600 predictive variables, but finally I found out ROAD showed a negative association with an NO2. So this one makes no sense, right? But after you use the machine learning, sometimes due to a very complicated computation process in the machine learning algorithms, sometimes you might find out the major ROAD is I imported this one in my model, but this one showed a negative association with the NO2. But you use this kind of association to build a model. That makes no sense. So my idea, we just try to filter out only variables with right directions and also achieve the statistical significance levels should be used for developing the machine learning based model.
Okay, I got one question from our audience.
Okay.
How about the islands of the nation, such as Penghu, Jinmen, and Three Islands?
Yeah, let's go back to this slide. Actually, I also have some conversation with Professor Wang Zuli in the past. So I know, of course, we have not only in Taiwan, we not only live in the main island, but we also have people living in the islet like the Penghu, Jinmen, and the Lüdao. But basically, the first challenge is to develop the air pollution prediction model for the islet. The first challenge will be the number of the monitoring stations on the islets. As I know, we have only 3 monitoring stations for these 3 islets. That indicates 1 monitoring stations for 1 islet. So in this case, the second challenge will be, basically, we must agree with that the industrial style between the main island of Taiwan and the islet should be totally different. That indicates the emission characteristics will be totally different between the main island of Taiwan and also the islets. So in this case, I suppose in the case that we want to develop a model for this Penghu, Jinmen, and the Lüdao, we should do it separately. We should develop a model for the isolate. We should do it separately. But the first challenge is only 3 monitoring stations, only data from 3 monitoring stations. So this is a big challenge when you develop a model. You say that I will use only data from 3 points of data, so 3 points of monitoring stations. And the second challenge is, in my approach, I basically use the lane cover information as predictive variables to develop my model, right? Let's say for most of the database we use here, we have found the lane inventory, like the digital neural network, no problem. We have the data for both the main island and also for the Penghu, Jinmen, and the other islets, no problem. But for some information like the landmark, actually this one I purchased this. I just buy this one from private companies, so I'm not pretty sure where they can have provided data for the islets. But let's say in the case we have the data from, we have the measurements, we have more measurement from the islet, and we also have the geospatial data for the islet. Of course, we can do it. Yeah.
Okay. I think time is up.
Okay.
It's perfect time, I think.
Perfect.
Thanks very much for Professor Wu's wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tsai. Thank you, Professor Hong.
Professor Hong. So let's call it our session instead. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for Professor Guo Yuliang and Dr. Wu Zhida wonderful informative sharing. And thank you for Dr. Hong and Professor Cai's perfect introduction. 谢谢郭阳教授还有吴志达老师为我们带来这么精彩的一个演讲哦，并再次感谢洪副院长还有蔡特命教授的一个介绍跟讨论哦。Okay, let's take a short break right now. The next session will start in 20 minutes at 13:10. And thank you. 接下来我们就请各位稍作休息一下，下一个议程将于20分钟后。下午3点10分开始哦，谢谢大家。Time flies, and now for the final keynote speech. Speaker is Professor Sakika Hojo. We are honored to have Dr. Wang Suli of NHRI and Dr. Wang Linling of Zhengzhou University serve as our moderator. Now let's welcome Professor Wang and Professor Wang. 时间很快就来到我们本次大会最后一位讲者，Sakika Hojo 教授。我们很荣幸邀请到国务院王淑丽研究员和正修大学黄丽英老师担任主持人。现在让我们来欢迎2位主持人。
好，那我就由我继续介绍北桃教授哈。Hello everyone online. I'm Linling Huang, come from Taiwan, Kaohsiung Zhengzhou University. Today, I'm very honored and happy to introduce to you Professor Sachiko Hojo. Professor Hojo received both medical and dental PhDs from Tohoku University. Her specialized in environmental medicine and epidemiology. Over the past 30 years, she has conducted multifaceted epidemiological investigations. She was a member of the research team on sick house syndrome funded by the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, MHLW, and now a member of the MHLW study group on central sensitization syndrome. Professor Hojo, please.
Thank you for generous introduction. I am Sachiko Hojo. I am a 70 years old researcher with 4 grandchildren from Japan. I'm very glad to be here. So, started the presentation. It's okay? Recently, the rapid increase in the number of patients with environmental hypersensitivity had become a worldwide problem, and the close relationship with allergic disease had been pointed out. However, its pathogenesis remains unclear. In the past 30 years, I have conducted multifaceted epidemiological investigation, including the preparation of a Japanese translation of international common questionnaires to evaluate environmental hypersensitivity, confirmation of its reliability and validity, and setting of Japanese unique screening criteria. I have also been collaborating on a study with Dr. Linling Fang in Taiwan since 2008. Today, I'd like to talk to you about environmental hypersensitivity as indicated in this slide. In 1997, I started a study on sick house syndrome. During the survey on SHS, I found that SHS often progressed to multiple chemical hypersensitivity unless the living environment was improved at the early stage. So I initiated a study on the relationship between SHS and MCS. As I continued the studies, I found that Many patients with SHS and MCS also showed hypersensitivity reaction to electromagnetic fields, such as personal computer and mobile phone. Then I started a study on EHS in 2008. I learned that health disorders such as SHS, MCS, and EHS are known as environmental hypersensitivity, environmental intolerance, or environmental illness. Moreover, I learned that many environmental hypersensitivity in early childhood also develop due to behavioral disorder such as autism and attention deficit hyperreactivity disorder. Therefore, recently, prevention of the onset of environmental hypersensitivity has become a major social issue worldwide. In order to analyze the onset mechanism of environmental hypersensitivity and study prevention measures, it is necessary to exchange information and collaborate internationally with researchers in a wide range of research fields. So in Japan, we have established 3 research groups as shown in this slide. Our research group includes researchers from a wide range of research fields, such as epidemiology, allergy, environmental medicine, public health, architecture, biology, chemistry, physics, environmental engineering, and environmental society. I am the representative of these 3 research groups. Here is a picture of the main member of our research group. Dr. Lin Fan and I are also here. Our research groups are always jointly working as follows. 1. Daily information exchanged by email. 2. Regular meetings. 3. Symposium and lectures for citizens. Environmental hypersensitivity is a health disorder characterized by a variety of systemic symptoms, as indication in this slide. It is closely related to allergic disease. However, the pathophysiology, such as its onset mechanism, has not been elucidated yet. Typical environmental hypersensitivity, sick house syndrome, SHS, multiple chemical sensitivity, MCS, electromagnetic hypersensitivity, EHS. From now, I will briefly talk about the latest findings on these syndromes. Modern people spend more than 90% of their time indoors, and the issue of health risks from indoor air pollutants is important. Following the 2 oil shocks in the 1970s, energy conservation in buildings was promoted in Europe and the US to save on heating and cooling costs. Since the early 1980s, a number of residents from energy-saving buildings in Europe and the US have been experiencing a health problem such as dizziness, nausea, headache, dryness of the mucosal membrane and skin, and respiratory symptoms such as wheezing. These phenomena became a social problem in Europe and the US and were called sick building syndrome. In Japan, since the 1980s, SHS has become a major research project that is being examined by several academic societies and funded by the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare Scientific Research Grant. In 2003, the guidelines for indoor air pollutants have been established. Moreover, the Sick House Syndrome Manual and Sick House Dictionary were published. In 2012, the Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology published a document on health hazards due to chemical substances in schools. Thus, Japan has a track record of success in reduction the risk of developing SHS. Next, I will talk about MCS. MCS is a health disorder that presents various symptoms in multiple organs, with ultra trace amount of chemicals that ordinary people do not feel. There is still no universal definition, but the most widely used definition of MCS is the definition of the 1999 consensus. The prevalence of MCS in countries globally ranges from 8% to 33.3%. According to Stayman et al., patients with physician-diagnosed MCS accounted for 12.8% of the U.S. population, and self-reported MCS patients account for 25.9% of the U.S. population. These percentages have tripled and doubled respectively compared to those 10 years ago. In Japan, Uchiyama Murayama applied quiz to Japanese individuals in 2000 and found that 0.74% of individuals exceeded Miller's MCS criteria. However, in 2012, Atma et al. Found that the number of individuals exceeding Miller MCS criteria was 4.4%, an increase of about sixfold. In 2012, we also conducted a survey using quiz and found that 5.8% of individuals exceeded the Hojo's MCS criteria. This result was consistent with the result of Asma et al. And suggests that the number of MCS patients is rapidly increasing in Japan. The 1999 consensus is the most widely used MCS definition. In the 1999 consensus of the Atlanta Conference, sponsored by the National Institute of Health, US, MCS was defined as meeting the following 6 criteria indicated in this slide. The quiz was a questionnaire recommended in the 1999 consensus. So I'll talk about quiz from now. The quiz was developed by Miller and Preholder in the US in 1999 for screening of patients with MCS, evaluation of treatment effect, and performance of epidemiological study on MCS using questionnaire. Quiz is the most widely used clinical screening test and research tool for identifying chemical intolerance. It has been translated into 16 languages. Japan, Taiwan, Australia, Denmark, Finland, Germany, Indonesia, Italy, Spain, Sweden, USA, and Uruguay, with more than 32,000 respondents. This slide shows 50 questions on the 5 subscales of quiz. The Japanese version of quiz, which was translated and confirmed for reliability and validity to establish the unique Japanese screening criteria by Hojo et al. Based on this, Hojo et al. Conducted various epidemiological studies, MCS and SHS, in Japan. The quiz Taiwan version was translated by Dr. Lin Fang. Now, I will move on to EHS. Hypersensitivity to electromagnetic waves was first discovered in the 1980s. In 1991, Dr. Ray, a U.S. physician, proposed the name electrical hypersensitivity, claiming that microwaves generated by power line and cell phone base station affect the autonomic nervous system and produce health problems closely related to MCS. Subsequently, this study was expanded, and more than 150 researchers from 25 countries participated in the WHO workshop in 2004. In 2005, WHO fact sheet 296, Electromagnetic Field and Public Health, Electromagnetic Hypersensitivity was published. Since then, a number of studies have been conducted, mainly in Europe, and names such as electromagnetic hypersensitivity and idiopathic environmental intolerance have been used. In this symposium, we will use the term electromagnetic hypersensitivity, EHS. However, the scientific elucidation of EHS is behind that of MCS. There is an urgent need to clarify the pathophysiology of EHS. This slide shows the prevalence of EHS, 0.7% to 30.3% in the world. In 2016, Hojo et al. In bioelectromagnetics reported that 3% to 4.8% of individuals were highly suspected of EHS in Japan. This slide shows the estimated prevalence of EHS by Hallberg and Overfeld in 2006. It is predicted that the number of patients with EHS will increase rapidly in developed countries in the future. This slide shows the example of skin lesion observed on the hand of patient with EHS alone and that of patient with EHS and MCS by Belpom et al. In France. The patient with EHS and MCS had more severe skin symptoms than the patient with EHS alone. Next, I'd like to talk about some of my epidemiological research. This slide is a list of my main paper in environmental hypersensitivity using quiz and/or EHS question area. There are 3 co-authored papers with Dr. Lindin Pham, which are shown in red. In this paper, we reported that we developed the Japanese version of the EHS questionnaire developed by LTT et al. In the UK, confirmed its reliability and validity, and set the unique Japanese screening criteria described in this slide. The EHS questionnaire was developed by LTT et al. In the UK in 2007 to assess the health effects of electromagnetic field. This is the Japanese version of the EHS questionnaire, which was modified into a Japanese translation with content suitable for Japanese lifestyle. Added Japanese specific questions such as sleeping hour, chronic disease related questions, and depression scale as shown in red. This slide shows a summary of our study on SHS using quiz. From the result of our survey on SHS in Japan, the following 3 conclusions can be drawn. 1. Children, women, and individuals with some allergies are more likely to develop to SHS during new construction or remodeling. 2. Patients with SHS can recover from early detection of indoor air pollutant. 3. If the measures are delayed, it will shift to MCS or EHS. So it is important to detect early and reduce indoor pollutants that are presumed to be the cause of SHS. Next, I would like to introduce our latest paper on MCS. The lifestyle of Japanese people have been changing rapidly over the past decade or so. In order to examine the relationship between changes in Japanese lifestyle and trend in environmental hypersensitivity, we compared quiz score between the old survey 1999 to 2002 and the new survey 2012 to 2015. We report the result in this paper. Next, I will talk to you the main result of this paper. This slide shows the comparison of physician estimated onset factor on MCS between the old and new surveys. In the new survey, electromagnetic field, perfume, clothes, cosmetic, softener, and chemicals in the medical treatment increased, resulting in highly diversified causes. This slide shows the result of comparing the quiz score of the MCS patient and the control between the new and old surveys. In MCS patients, the total score of Q1, Q2, and Q5 increased for 10 years, and the number of avoidance items increased, indicated that the symptoms became more serious. On the other hand, in the control group, many ongoing chemical exposure were increased for 10 years. However, the total score of Q1, Q2, and Q3 decreased, suggesting that, as Miller argues, the manifestation of symptom is only masked, and the symptom may eventually become apparent. This slide shows the comparison of the allergic disease complication rate of patients with MCS between the old and new surveys by logistic regression analysis. Compared to 10 years ago, MCS patients had 5.3 times higher in allergic rhinitis, 5.2 times higher in bronchial asthma, 3.8 times higher in atopic dermatitis, and 2.6 times in food allergies. Conclusion of this study, compared to 10 years ago, 1. Opportunity for Japanese people to be exposed to chemical substances and electromagnetic waves were increasing. 2. Factors that can cause MCS were diversifying. 3. In the MCS patient group, the score for chemical intolerance and daily life disorder have increased significantly, and the complication rate of allergic disease has also increased sharply, resulting in aggravation. 4. In the control group, the chemical intolerance and symptom score were significantly decreased, although the chemical exposure rate was significantly increased. As Miller argued, the symptoms are only masked, and it's predicted that the symptom will eventually become apparent. Next, I would like to talk about our epidemiological survey conducted using the quiz and EHS questionnaire together. This slide shows the course of symptom onset in self-reported EHS patients from SHS to MCS to EHS was the most common course, followed by MCS to EHS, EHS only, EHS to MCS. Thus, more than 80% of self-reported EHS patients also had MCS. This slide shows the course of symptoms in a physician-diagnosed MCS patient. The most common was MCS to EHS in 52.7%, followed up MCS alone in 40.9%, and EHS to MCS in 3.6%. Thus, it was found that about 60% of physician-diagnosed MCS patients had EHS. This slide shows the result of quiz symptom score of patients with MCS and EHS combined, those with MCS alone, and those with EHS alone. MCS and EHS combined type scored significantly higher than the single types. This slide shows the result of comparison of quiz score of 5 groups. MCS in red and EHS in blue had significantly higher score than the other 3 groups. Bronchial asthma in green, atopic dermatitis in purple, and control in black. However, there was no significant difference between MCS and EHS. There were also no significant difference among the 3 groups: bronchial asthma, atopic dermatitis, and control. This figure presents the comparison of the score of 9 types of EMFs: computer, electrical applicants, fluorescent lighting, microwave oven, mobile phone, power line, radio television transmitter, telecommunication mast, and television, related to the onset of symptoms on the EHS questionnaire in 4 groups. The highest score were in the EHS in blue, followed by MCS in red, bronchial asthma in green, and control group in black. All 9 types of score in the EHS group were significantly higher than those in the MCS, bronchial asthma, and control groups. Particularly, the score for telecommunication mast and mobile phone were high. These results were similar to those of Eltit et al. In the UK. This slide shows the number and percentage of those who exceeded the MCS or EHS criteria. In the control group, there were 5.9%, 4.6%, and 1.2% of those who exceeded the MCS criteria, those who exceeded the EHS criteria, and those who exceeded the MCS and EHS criteria, respectively. It was suggested that those who exceeded these reference values may be patients with MCS, patients with EHS, or patients with MCS and EHS combined. It was also found that the number of patients with bronchial asthma and atopic dermatitis who exceeded the standard value was significantly higher than that of the general population. Now, I will move to my final message for this presentation. Conclusion 1. 1. Environmental hypersensitivity, like allergic disease, is a health disorder that affects any modern person. 2. In Japan, there are potential patients with environmental hypersensitivity at a rate of 3 to 6%, and there is a possibility that the number will increase in the future. 3. Children and individuals with some allergic disease are more likely to develop environmental hypersensitivity. 4. Patients who develop environmental hypersensitivity in early childhood are more likely to have behavioral disorder. 5. In order to analyze the onset mechanism of environmental hypersensitivity and study preventive measures, it is necessary to exchange information and collaborate internationally with researchers in a wide range of research fields. 6. For collaborative research, the International Common Questionnaire, such as quiz, used in many countries, is an effective tool. Conclusion 2. The pathological mechanism of environmental hypersensitivity can be explained by the 3-stage hypothesis indicated in this slide. To prevent environmental hypersensitivity, it is important to identify the environmental factor in the 2nd and 3rd stage early and preventive or reduce them. Finally, I'd like to thank all the researchers who are part of 3 research groups on environmental hypersensitivity in Japan, as indicated in the slide. This is the last slide. With COVID-19, may increase the number of patients with environmental hypersensitivity due to increased opportunity for chemical exposure, such as disinfectant exposure and electromagnetic exposure due to increased online work. I am researcher with 4 grandchildren, so I would like to continue my research with you in the spirit of Think Future, Act Now. Thank you for your kind attention. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so very much to Professor Hojo's wonderful talk. And so let's start the question. We have from audience about the question about any underlying reasons for the observation that early MCS make multiple chemical syndrome over the last 10 years increased ADHD, that's 过动自闭. Could Professor Hojo provide some questions why MCS cause ADHD? Professor Hojo, please.
Thank you for the question. That your question is why MCS onset factor is diversified. It's that question.
Yes. Yes. So, autism.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I think there are many. We have many opportunity to chemical. For example, we made many chemicals. We use many chemicals. For example, performer or softener and say many chemicals we use, and moreover we use the we exposure the electromagnetic heat exposure. For example, many IT items develop, so we have many opportunity to exposure by electromagnetic field. So, and with corona, with COVID-19, we use the we had opportunity many opportunity to online meeting on the online work. So and 5G, what they many electromagnetic field increase. That's why I think
right.
MCS and EHS patient increase. I think.
Yeah, thank you so much for the emphasis of now we use a lot of electronic devices, particularly for the COVID-19. And it's very important, Professor Hojo, that emphasize the electromagnetic hypersensitivity is also very important for well-being.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and we have also another question about the reason why MCS again MCS is increased so much during the last 10 years. Although we have put a lot of efforts, including Japan, of course. Yeah. So please, Professor Hojo.
What was it?
Yeah. We have been making a lot of efforts during the last 10 years, but the prevalence of MCS still increased a lot.
Yeah.
So how do you think about the reasons?
So chemical, but the MCS we use many chemical
Right.
yeah insecticide or side softener, and in Japan we have a problem in the perfume problem. Okay, many people in the some people think the good to smell, but the many but the perfume Dinding Dr. Dinding as a 香りのguy perfume guy.
Yeah.
香害
Do you
对
have
香
in
味的
Taiwan? Yeah, 香りの guy
Yeah.
with perfume problem. Many people use the perfume, very kind of perfume. What say?
Yeah, perfume. Yeah, yes. People use many personal care products like perfume. Yeah.
Personal care product. So, do you have the same problem in Taiwan? No.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and so sometimes people clean a lot, but put a lot of personal care products too, and to smell good, but it might not be good for indoor air. Yeah, thank you so much for the reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, this is a very wonderful talks, and we have 2 more questions. And thank you for the audience passionate discussion. And so, do you think because of the COVID-19 pandemic, do you think that multiple chemical syndrome might aggregate the infection or symptom of the disease resulting from COVID-19 infection? Yeah. Yeah, please.
Yeah. But you have a question? So
Yes. We have audience asking whether the multiple chemical syndrome may aggregate COVID-19, maybe infections or symptoms. Yeah.
So we in Japan we use many in this infect chemical. Many chemical this infection chemical. We can exposure. So
So
I think the may increase the MCS. It's okay? No.
Yes, I think the answer is yes, because of the sickness and source of health effects from the MCS, like a fragile, so which might aggregate COVID-19, I think. Yeah. And also, the last question here, would the EHS mediate the chemical component of electronic device? And I am not quite sure the question, but it seems to me that with the chemical and the electronic devices interact when both multiple chemical and electromagnetic exposure exaggerate the hypersensitivity.
Combined chemical exposure and electromagnetic field exposure and combined. So combined patient have a severe symptom. And not it's difficult to care. And
Right.
So,
I think this is very important, and the answer is yes, but it's not so easy to measure, to evaluate, right? Thank you so much. I think this is the last but least talk, because we usually use chemical measurements, but electromagnetic hypersensitivity is there. And Professor Hojo tackled the very difficult measurements and provide us many scientific evidences to care for well-beings. And because we stay indoor quite for a long time, and definitely we must collaborate and to tackle on this important but difficult issue. And thank you. I think the time is about the time, so I hand it over to Dr. Wu Wade to continue this wonderful forum. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Wang. Thanks for Professor Hojo wonderful and interesting talk. And thank you, Professor Wang and Dr. Huang, for great introduction and discussion. 谢谢 Hojo 教授为我们带来非常这么精彩的一个演讲，并感谢两位主持人王老师跟黄老师的一个介绍。The time passed surprised quickly before come to the end of today's conference. We are very delighted to invite Professor Chen Baozhong. He is the chairman of our conference to sum up today's presentation and give us the closing remarks. Welcome, Professor Chen Baozhong. 今天会议的时间过得很快，今天的会议即将进入尾声。我们再次很荣幸邀请我们大会主席陈保忠所长来为我们进行一个闭幕的一个致辞。现在就让我们用热烈的欢迎来欢迎陈保忠所长。谢谢。
好，谢谢今天所有的主持人还有这个所有的演讲者特别在最后面我们的Hojo先生的演讲非常的跟前面的空气污染演讲非常的不一样不过空气污染绝对是一个化学物质，很多的也会有类似的这个健康上面的影响那就像我们的常常很多的过敏性疾病一样其实是有一些雷同，可是又不是很清楚所以今天到今天的最后一个节目我们从早上到现在其实有关这个空气污染的议题还要持续的努力的特别今天演讲者也不少的提到上个礼拜才 WHO 才公布新的 guideline 他的目标当然非常的理想哦。他说现在全球每10个人都会其中有9个会呼吸到这个不干净的空气，只有1/10是干净的。就我们看了一下可能连我们的台湾的东部都变成都还不是很好所以呢值得大家再继续努力的哈。那我想今天才是一个开始的哈。那精准环境医学研讨会呢，我想持续在明年会持续的办理。那当然今天也是公共卫生联合年会的第1天了哈。那第1天就非常的精彩的带入这个在环境中最重要的议题了。所以这个后续呢明天下午1点半又持续在这个所谓环境健康势能，就是说怎么让民众了解这个环境的议题的相关的讨论所以欢迎在明天下午，也就是联合年会第2天下午1点半，也是在继续会探讨有关环境健康在民众的势能的提升在现阶段空气污染无法控制得很好之下，在怎么样增加民众的健康势能来保护自己这也是目前可以立即进行的地方。所以我再一次谢谢所有的主持人、演讲者，还有所有的线上参与的听众老师们、学生让我们今天度过一个非常充裕的这个知识的飨宴那我们可以也学会到很多重要的议题最后呢明天是我们的台湾的教师节也最后面敬祝这个我们所有的全国的公共卫生的老师老师们教师节快乐虽然现在没有放假，明天还是继续要上班敬祝大家这个教师节愉快特别在这个新冠肺炎疫情之下其实在这个用线上的讨论是一个很好的一个交流的管道希望我们可以持续的讨论。再一次谢谢所有的每一位的参与者但我应该今天还是要谢谢我们的威德了他今天负责整天的串场吴威德博士谢谢他的，还有我们的工作的团队，谢谢所有幕后的协助的同仁再一次谢谢所有人敬祝大家健康平安，谢谢。我们的今天的大会议就到这边结束，谢谢每一位，
谢谢，拜拜，
谢谢
Thank you，波修先生。